Hello again and welcome to a bearing investigation video featuring Boca bearings. Now, one of the things I assist Boca bearings in doing is updating listings of theirs that may have some inaccuracies in the types of bearings or sizes of bearings that go in engines that they have listed. Another thing I do is when I come across an engine, the first thing I usually do is look for the bearing sizes on Boca's website, and if I find an instance where that engine is not represented and shown on their website, then I investigate what size bearings does this engine take and provide that information to Boca so they can create a kit number and then add it to their website. So that is the purpose of today's video. Today I was gifted an engine that is not listed on Boca's website as having any bearings at all, and there's a little bit of a story that goes along with it also. So with all that said, let's go straight to the table and I'll discuss this engine, and then we'll get right to the bearing investigation and determine exactly what size bearings fit inside this engine. Okay, so here is the engine in question. This is an engine that was gifted to me by a really good friend of mine, Chuck, and it is an ASP 52 engine. Now, these engines, when ASP engines first came out, they had a circular or round head just like everything else. And then sometime in the early 2000s, engine companies like OS, ASP, and others started to go to more of a square type head. This engine, from the review article I found, dates back to 2010, and that review article has some really interesting information in it pertaining to the bearings and the engine itself that I'm going to refer to quite frequently in this investigation. So, as I said, this was a gift to me, and from what I can gather, this looks like a brand new engine. It doesn't look like it's ever been run. It's completely free. The bearings are free, obviously, but as I said, the purpose of this investigation is to add this listing for this engine to the Boca website. So I've got the exhaust here, which is not relevant to this investigation at all, and I've got a set of Boca's digital calipers here that will hopefully or possibly assist me in determining what these bearings are. So the thing with these bearings in this engine, and if it is true that this is really a new in-box engine, is that there should not be any residue on them whatsoever, so I should be able to actually just read the bearing sizes that are printed on the bearings themselves once I get them out of the engine. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and disassemble this engine completely, and then we'll investigate what size bearings are in here, and then I can provide the appropriate information to Boca so that they can create a listing for this and continue to sell bearing kits for this particular size engine. Okay, I'm back now, and as you can see, I've got this engine completely disassembled, and I was correct in my assessment earlier that this is a brand new engine, never seen fuel. Now, before I talk about the bearings, I want to talk about some of the things about this engine that I like, and we'll see if there's anything I don't like about the construction of this, because ASP is a Chinese-made engine, and they were made by a company called Sanye. And Sanye marketed and manufactured many engine lines in that factory, marketed under different names. ASP, SC, Magnum, maybe some other engines also. So they're all basically the same engine. But one of the things I want to talk about here is one of the things that is nice about these engines is that they're true ABC construction, which means it's an aluminum piston riding in a brass chrome plated sleeve. It's a brass sleeve that's got true chrome plating as opposed to what OS has been using for many, many years, which is ABN, which is an aluminum piston in a brass sleeve, but it's got a nickel cell or nickel plating that has had a history of peeling. One of the other things I really like about this engine is this drive hub. And it's one of these drive hubs that it's got this washer on here. I got to make sure I don't lose, but it's got flats on it. There's that washer. So that when you go to put it on there, instead of having that tapered collet, conical tapered collet that can always be really difficult to remove, it has flats on it, very much like what you'll see on many Enya engines. Now it's got two flats, not just one, like OS was doing with their V-series engines initially, the V95 and the V62, which tended to round out. So I like that because these are usually typically much easier to pull off when you're disassembling the engine. Let's see here, the carburetor. the carburetor has basically a combination screw here. It's a or a barrel retention screw, but it's also long enough and it's got a nut here so that you can actually use it as a throttle stop screw, which is always something I like. Now, the only drawback to this carb that I don't particularly care for is that the low-speed needle is really, really, really recessed in there, and you really have to have a pretty long screwdriver to get in there and access it, which means you really can't just readily look at it and see its position relative to any change you made because it's not flush, so it's harder to see the adjustments you're making on that. Other than that, this thing looks like it's a beautiful engine. So all those things said, the other thing that is kind of good and kind of bad about these ASP engines and other engines from Sanya is that they do have a gasket on the rear cover, but I bet you anything you really can't see that, because it's a clear gasket. It's a transparent material. Now, that's the drawback. The drawback is that you can't see it. You may lose it when it comes off, especially if you put it in an ultrasonic cleaner. The good news is that those gaskets are very, very durable, and I've never ever had to replace one unless you actually tear it and don't know it's there and you tear it. But I mean, so these gaskets are very durable, but darn near impossible to see. So anyway, let's get to this investigation. So I want to show you a couple of excerpts from this magazine article, or this review first. So the reviewer, and I don't know that it shows his name, says here, the engine I'm reviewing here is an ASP 52 4-stroke or 2-stroke, but for all intents and purposes it's the same as the Magnum 52, the XL 52 Magnum 2-stroke engine. So I went and I looked up the Magnum 52 engine on Boca's website, and it came up with a kit number of ENK-031. And that kit includes an MR608 and an MR6001 size bearing. So I thought, okay, well, that's interesting, that's cool. If it's an exact copy of the Magnum engine, which it does physically, externally, it does look very similar, then it should be a layup. You just go get those, if you see this review, you get that kit number, and then you say, oh, I can replace the bearings. Well, that would not be correct, because those are not the right size bearings for this engine. So the next one excerpt from this review I want to show or read to you and show is, it says here, the crankshaft is steel with the usual diameter for a 40 class engine and appears to be well made. It is supported on two industry standard size bearings, a 6902 and an R8. But the bearings provided seem to be of relatively low quality, not uncommon with Chinese-made engines. I find it strange these days that even quality brands such as Sato OS tend to skimp on the quality of bearings used in their engines. And of course, this is a cost-cutting thing. So here it says that the bearings in the review engine are a 6902 and an R8. So I've also found that that is not correct either, which is really, really interesting. So what we're going to do here is these are the bearings I removed from this engine, and I thought it was interesting because they do have what appears to be a rubber sealed front bearing. So I was thinking, well, this will be easy. I'll just read the part number off the bearing. But there are no numbers on either side of this seal. At first I thought, when it was still in the engine, I thought, well, maybe they just got the numbers on the inside. There are no numbers on this rubber seal at all, anywhere. So it's like, okay, well, there we go. Likewise, this rear main bearing looks like a really nice bearing. I wouldn't say it spins. Maybe it's just, it doesn't appear to have any lubrication in there, any grease anyway. And it doesn't just freely spin, but it feels smooth. But again, no numbers on this bearing indicating what it is. So even if you thought, well, I'm just going to take them out and read the numbers on there, well, you'd be kind of in a hard spot without a set of calipers. So what I did was I got this nice, beautiful set of digital calipers from Boca, and I'll turn it on here, zero it out, and I'm set to fractional right now, so I'm going to just measure this front bearing first. So this is showing 0.3735. So in my mind, I've seen this many times before. This is actually a 375 bearing. And then let's go to the OD. The OD is a 8745 or 875. Those measurements actually are an R6 bearing, not an R8 as stated in that review. Standard R6 bearing. So we know that's an R6, and I have a Boca R6 bearing right here, which just so happens to be a R6 RS, a rubber sealed bearing, which on the Boca bearing, it states the size on both shields, or both seals. So let's see here, this one's saying it's a point, 373. Points 373 with 0.874 OD, and our thickness is the same. So that's an R6 bearing. So this is actually an R6 bearing, not an R8, and certainly not whatever that other, it said a MR608, certainly not a 608. A 608 has a much smaller ID than an R6. So that's completely false there. So knowing that this is an MR 6902, which is what I've already discovered this is, I'm going to shift to my metric sizing and go to my engineering guide here. So the 6902, according to Boca's engineering guide, and of course I know this pretty much off the top of my head anyway, but is a 15 millimeter ID. So this is a 14.97 ID, and the OD is, let's see here, 6902, 1.1024. I'm sorry, 0.2756, or 27 point, where are we? Where's our OD? OD, yeah. Apparently they're measuring that in fractional here, so it's 1.1024. So let's do the same thing on this one, the OD, 1.1030. And then if we measure this in fractional as opposed to 15 millimeters, it's a 0.5906 according to the guide. So basically what we're seeing here is this is a 6902. 6902 from Boca, R6, 6902 from the engine. So bottom line is, even if you have a review article to go by, you better have a set of calipers to measure it, because even the review article's wrong, because they were saying that the front bearing was an R8 when in fact it's an R6. So now that I have this information and know that the kit number for this set of bearings, an R6 in different configurations or different shield configurations, but the base kit number for one of these is an ENK-001. It's a very, very common size bearing for many 40 size two-stroke engines. In fact, if you go and pull that up on their site and then go to the also fits, you'll see a huge list of other types of engines that the ENK-001 kit fits. So that's what this is. So all I really need to do is inform Boca that for the ASP52 engine, the proper kit number, or at least the kit components, the kit number would be could be an ENK-001, or if they choose to make a new kit number, just include that it's an R6 and an MR6902 bearing. So that concludes our bearing investigation for this particular ASP engine.